Hi there. Now, you may be wondering what on earth am I giving a shout out to Danny Shine of Social Experimentalist on a Gnostic channel. He is a mischief maker, heartbreaker, and coal raker, and all the other things that possibly rhyme with mischief maker. I was going to write a poem about him actually. Anyway, yes, he is in following Socrates in his mischief making and corrupting the young of the United Kingdom rather than ancient Greece. And I hope that the same fate uh, doesn't uh, doesn't lie in wait for Danny Shine. I have a feeling that if anyone was to offer him the cup of hemlock, it wouldn't actually be a person from the Caucasian race. It would probably be some irate person from another racial community in the UK that would take such umbrage at what he was saying. But so he likes to wind people up with lots of different controversial subjects, and he always takes an extreme position on everything. Unlike Socrates, though, he doesn't argue with people logically. He rather leaves that to the air to to argue with people. And I'm saying this because I don't suppose you Americans be very interested in Danny Shine because simply in America someone probably just take out a gun and shoot him. In particular, they would shoot him over his latest mischief making, coal raking project with the Expiry Party. Basically, the Expiry Party is calling on making it illegal to reproduce. And he gets into a heap of trouble on the streets of London, the UK, for daring to suggest that people stop breeding. Um, and I've actually made a video about the critics of antinatalism, which is what Danny Shine is currently plugging, and which is the belief that you should never have been born, that your birth heralded harm to the planet, and people should really stop breeding. Not that people should get rid of the kids that they've already got; they just shouldn't bring any more into the world. That's all it is, really. But people get very, very, very offended. Not least the authorities, actually, who he gets continuously hassled by the police for exercising his freedom of speech. It's almost as bad as if he was a Holocaust denier, and people were like screaming and shouting and wanting to kill him for being a Holocaust denier. Um, which basically is ridiculous. And I personally wouldn't mind him megaphoning Holocaust denial on the streets of the UK in London if he really wanted to. I mean, his facts are wrong, and you could just ignore him or just say wrong facts, mate. I disagree with you, and walk on. But people are offering to hit him. People are getting complaining to the police about him, and the police are trying to move him on some kind of technicality in the law, which means, well, it's actually the law has changed. It used to be that you couldn't insult people if it was likely to cause breach of the peace and public order. But now they've removed insulting people because, it's not a criminal offence to insult somebody if they choose to be insulted. I mean, threatening somebody with physical harm it amounts to intimidation, and that is covered by the Public Order Act. And breach of the peace is obviously incorporated into that. So, you can't go around offering to kill people. For example, the legislation was brought in at the time of labour strikes when there were lots of pickets and people trying to cross the picket line for the trade unions. Some silly people would threaten actual physical harm on the coach drivers that were driving the so-called blacklegs or strike breakers into the factory or the coal pit. So obviously they couldn't allow that, and they brought this legislation in decades ago to deal with the actual intimidation. You see, but well, then maybe you might say, well, fair enough. I'm not quite sure that actually such legislation would be supported by the U.S. Constitution in any case, really, because it really does mean how do you define threatening behaviour or words that threaten people? I mean, words are just words, really, at the end of the day. And if you can't say words, then you don't have any freedom of speech, do you? So it's only literally if you're waving a gun at somebody or waving your fists at somebody that they might be called threatening behaviour. Otherwise, surely words are just words. And the US Constitution supports the action of words. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never help me and never hurt me, sort of thing, which is the US Constitution's. I hope it's that kind of sensible attitude that it has towards free speech, but I don't know enough about the USA to actually comment on that. But my point of this video is that it's very interesting how people take great umbrage at the idea of stopping breeding. In fact, it's almost, dare I say, a sort of a kind of a zeitgeist thing. It's almost like a sort of deep archetype that we honour the Creator God and that we breed in the name of the Creator God, and almost in gratitude to the Creator God that we have to breed and have children, which accounts for why there's homophobia, for example, because homosexuals, as they're called, gay people can't actually have children. I mean, they can certainly look after other people's children, but they can't have children of their own. And throughout centuries, of course, gay people have been persecuted, all right, but because they represent an anti-fertility tendency. Some have called it an anti-fertility cult, and have even kind of suggested that gay people are a part of a demonic cult to overthrow the Creator God and overthrow the fertility aspect of the monotheistic gods of the book, God of the book, Islam, Christianity and Judaism, for example. And I'm quite sure that, in fact, if Danny Shine suggested that Muslims and Jews and certain evangelical Christians couldn't breed, he probably would get himself shot, I would suggest, really, or beaten up anyway. So what is this fury against this archetypal fury against antinatalism? I mean, maybe there are actual. Maybe there is wickedness in high places, and it would go right up to the crown itself, to Keter. And Keter could be actually, if you got there, you would probably see that it is in fact the Demiurge sitting on the throne of Keter, in fact, as the Creator God. Because basically, if you think about it, if you desisted from breeding, you would not be bringing any more souls into this world to be imprisoned in this capsule of materialism and material evil, and you would be preventing the torture of souls being in this vale of tears and this valley of death. And at any rate, the Demiurge couldn't have his fun anymore in torturing all these souls. He wouldn't have any reason to be either, because there wouldn't be any souls left to torture if nobody had any children. So I think that there's possibly some kind of literal psychic force arrayed against anybody who has the stupid idea, stupid in quotes, of stopping breeding. And perhaps this is sort of behind, on the psychic level, behind the persecution of Catars, because they also, they actually had a two-tier system, but the perfected ones, the initiates, were instructed not to have sex, not to have children. And of course, in those days, the only way to not have children is to not have sex. And nowadays it's a little bit more complicated than that, but actually not much, in fact, if you think about it. Contraception isn't that reliable. People don't like contraception. People think it's inconvenient. And people also have an attitude towards contraception. It was all jolly in the 1960s, but now people are very anti-contraception, largely, and don't use it anyway for for possibly for some kind of on the psychic level, because the demiurge doesn't want them to use contraception. It wants you to get pregnant. And of course, it doesn't like abortion, the pro-choice movement, because they say that you can have an abortion if you don't want the child, which is also sort of preventing the demiurge from having his fun with actually having unwanted children, which would be even more fun for him. So I think wickedness in high places. I think the demiurge really doesn't like people criticizing his fertility. He doesn't like people criticizing fertility per se, and not having children is an insult and an affront, and it undermines his authority, undermines his plan to keep as many souls trapped in this material plane as he can. And so, therefore, maybe this is linked to reincarnation, that the souls are just recycled over and over again. There's a certain number of souls, and they keep getting recycled because people keep having children. So this is a kind of metaphysical view, I suppose, of what Danny Shine is saying. I mean, he isn't saying this. He isn't a Gnostic. So his reasons why you should stop breeding are environmental and moral as well, I suppose, as well. But there could be a metaphysical reason why there's so much hatred for the expiring party, so much hatred for people that that don't, that say it's immoral to breed, it's immoral to have children, and because you're bringing children into suffering. It's funny that there's almost this kind of rage that's been planted in a lot of people over the criticism, over the promotion of antinatalism and the promotion of abortion, promotion of pro-choice, for example. Although the argument, actually, the antinatalist argument, that you can't ask a fetus whether it wants to be born or not, is also the same argument they could use to say that abortion is not morally justified, because you can't ask the fetus if it wishes to be aborted, having been conceived. You see, so that's a kind of a strange little quirk to the argument, antinatalist argument. Is it antinatalism could also be anti-abortion as well, which is very strange. One of the contradictions, I suppose, of the lower worlds, really. Anyway, he's very entertaining, as Danny Shine. I mean, he is a mischief maker. I don't agree with a lot of what he says, and I think he is bullying, and I think he does insult people, but he insults people in a friendly sort of way, a bit like, when you go to ventriloquist's show, the ventriloquist dummy often insults people in the audience. And sometimes ventriloquist dummies also get punched as well, which is sort of interesting, because drunk people think that the ventriloquist dummy is actually insulting them, as actually the dummy is actually alive, and then they go and punch him on the stage. Anyway, I think possibly Danny Shine should have a ventriloquist dummy and learn to ventriloquism. That might be safer for him, actually, because... but he's been doing this for 10 years, and mostly he gets, people giving him the finger and the bird and saying shut up or go away, or, he's never had any, well, occasionally he's had a bit of physical violence handed out to him. He's been pushed around and threatened sometimes, but nothing. The expiry party brings out a lot of aggression in people, which I find fascinating. And some of the people who get very aggressive are the sort of people that you wouldn't think would get very aggressive about this issue. But they feel that their manliness or their manhood is being threatened, I suppose, by the fact they shouldn't have fertility. I mean, maybe they have fertility issues, or perhaps they have some kind of sexual dysfunctional issue, which prevents them from having children or prevents them from having sex. And I suppose he pushes their buttons in some way. But for whatever reason, he's very interesting, and he raises a lot of issues in the UK about freedom of speech, which perhaps you don't have in the USA, or perhaps you do. And from that, the issue of freedom of speech is fascinating, really. I think actually, in terms of the Gnostic Church or Gnostic movement, I suppose a lot of Gnostics do de-emphasize antinatalism or the antinatalist aspect of Gnosticism, simply because they need to get on with other religious people that are into fertility and into natalism. So I suppose it's quite brave of Danny Shine to take on natalists all over the world because you do risk actually invoking or creating persecution of Gnosticism by emphasizing antinatalism too much. And I suppose so, in that sense, Danny Shine's videos are a sort of kind of have a hidden warning, I suppose, to Gnostics within the religious community not to rock the boat too much in regard to human fertility and human sexuality.